On Saturday night, I'll be listening to Usyk versus Joshua exclusively live on TalkSport while I'm enjoying my Saturday night Chinese. Special fried rice, bosh. Special chow mein, bosh. Sweet and sour chicken balls, bosh. Sweet and sour chicken Hong Kong style, bosh. Salt and chili king prawn, bosh. Salt and chili chicken, bosh. Barbecue spare ribs, bosh. Roast pork Chinese style, bosh. Crispy aromatic duck, bosh. Chips, bosh. Prawn crackers, bosh. Curry sauce, bosh. Right, if I was on the phone to the Chinese, local Chinese, it'd be egg fried rice, special fried rice, large. Plain chow mein, shredded chicken chow mein, large. Salt and chili king prawn, salt and chili chicken, kung po prawn. Sweet and sour chicken balls, sweet and sour pork balls. Shredded chili beef, beef in black bean sauce, mini pancake rolls, large pancake roll, curry sauce, 2 portions of prawn crackers. Bosh.
Okay, let me just adjust my microphone. Can you guys hear me loudly and clearly? 1 second. Do a quick sound check. Can you guys hear me loudly and clearly? Oh shit, let me just get my other thing up. Right. Well, how do you guys think that went? What I'm going to do, if I can get my screens in order here, I'm going to give you my thoughts on how that interview went, Eddie Hearn and Simon Jordan. I will give you my thoughts, and then what I will do is I will read your comments, and you guys can be the judge. Right, thank you, Chris Watkins. You can hear that. All right, let's go. Right, so first and foremost, let me start with the formalities, right? Have to give Eddie Hearn credit for turning up. He turned up and he stayed for what, an hour and a half? So look, first and foremost, on this channel, always give credit where credit is due. You have to give credit to Eddie Hearn for turning up. We criticised him for not showing up and giving an interview to TalkSport and Simon Jordan in particular, and he's shown up and done that. So first and foremost, got to give credit to Eddie Hearn. He showed up. He answered the questions. Were the answers satisfactory or not? We'll discuss that in just a second. But first and foremost, I'm going to give credit to Eddie Hearn for actually turning up. Second of all, I want to say this, and this is where it's going to get tasty. And let me tell you something right now. This is going to be a very, very, very tasty episode. So if you are tuning in, you're going to get your money's worth on this one, because I'm going to come out and say some things that I normally probably wouldn't say, but I'm going to come out and say them because it's stuff that needs to be said. First and foremost, the state of journalism, boxing journalism in this country is an absolute fucking disgrace, right? And I think that Simon Jordan should be given the utmost respect for going out and asking the hard questions that nobody wanted to ask. Because you know what? It's an absolute fucking disgrace, yeah, that this issue, right, and we're referring to the issue with Conor, Benn and adverse findings, right? To me, it's an absolute disgrace that we're now closing in on April. And this is an issue that started occurring, August, September of last year. And we've had to wait 6 months for somebody to turn around and ask, some decent questions and actually put Eddie Hearn under the microscope. And that tells you, right, everything you need to know about the state of journalism, on YouTube. It tells you that all these little YouTube channels that are running around interviewing Eddie Hearn, the bottom line is they are not fit for purpose. Press 1 if you would agree with me on that, and press 2 if you disagree with me. I think one thing is the fact that it's come down to Simon Jordan, and I've seen people criticize Simon Jordan's background and say, oh well, he ran a failed business, and he's an expert on mobile phone sales and he don't know nothing about boxing. Well, I'll tell you what, if that's the case, right, that's a pretty sad indictment, isn't it, on the state of your favorite fucking YouTube channels, isn't it? Don't you think it's a fucking sad indictment, on the state of these fucking YouTube channels, right, in the UK, right, that a fucking former mobile phone salesman, I mean, that's Simon Jordan is one of the greatest self-made businessmen, right, that the UK has ever seen. Plenty people have lost money on, if you look at Dragon's Den, by the way, most of the guys on Dragon's Den, Peter Jones and quite a few others, have lost a lot of money and then come back and made a lot of money. So that's not uncommon. But the fact that a former football chairman / former mobile phone salesman, whatever you want to call him, is the one to be asking Eddie Hearn these direct questions, and these other fucking YouTube channels and these other so-called YouTube journalists, right? And these other people that are taking your fucking money. See, that's what does get me. I've seen people criticizing Simon Jordan this morning on that, saying, oh, well, he's out of his depth, you don't know nothing about boxing, which I actually disagree with, right? But even if you are right on that, then what does that say about these fucking YouTube channels that you're fucking super chatting and paying money? What does that say? The fact that it's down to Simon Jordan of all people. These so-called hardcore boxing channels, these so-called hardcore boxing fans, they get a microphone and they turn up to Matchroom shows, or they turn up to the TV broadcast every week, and they fail to ask any questions whatsoever. So let me start off by saying it's an absolute disgrace that it's taken 6 months for any sort of decent questioning to happen. And I say Simon Jordan deserves a lot of credit because he's been carrying the slack. The bottom line of it is, and let me say this should never have come down to Simon Jordan to do this. Press 3 if you agree with me on that, and press 4 if you disagree. It should never have come down to Simon Jordan to question Eddie Hearn 6 to 7 months after one of his fighters failed multiple drugs tests, and we had the whole saga with Chris Eubank. That's what you need to ask yourself. Instead of criticising Simon Jordan and saying, oh, we don't know nothing about football, this guy could have done it better, ask yourself, where are all these YouTube channels that you be super chatting? Why aren't they asking questions? The ones that are turning up to Matchroom shows every fucking week. What? It's been 6-7 months. Why haven't they asked any of the questions that Simon Jordan asked if it's so easy? Should I tell you the reason why they won't do it? Because it's all about access, isn't it? It's an absolutely disgusting indictment on the state, yeah, of journalism in this country. What Simon Jordan has shown, whether you think he won a debate or didn't win the debate, I'll give you my opinion in a minute, right? But whether you think Simon Jordan did win the debate or didn't win the debate, what we have to see, in my opinion, is the state of the so-called media who have access. They are a disgrace. And that's what that has shown today. They are a disgrace, and they should absolutely, utterly hang their heads in shame. We'll get onto the reasons why in a minute. So let me say that. You know, you're literally sitting there and you're letting the WBC sit there and tell you that a man has failed multiple drugs tests because of chicken eggs, and you're legit turning up to Matchroom shows every single week. You're turning up to the broadcast every single week, and you don't ask a single question about how that could be possible. You don't ask a single fucking question about how that can be possible. The man turns up on Piers Morgan and says, I've got a document that could help prove my innocence, but I'm not going to show it to the British Boxing Board of Control. And you don't ask any questions. Why? Because all you care about is access. All you care about is a paycheck. Shall we just be real today? What do you guys think? I can see your guys' comments. Keep your guys' comments up. I'll keep reading them. Do you think I'm being fair in what I'm saying? All these guys that have the access, all they care about is views and paychecks. That's all they care about. They don't care about boxing. All this shit about care about boxing. Oh, I care about boxing. Most of them don't even box. Oh, I care about boxing. I'm a hardcore boxing fan. Oh, all this nonsense. No, you're not. You've never been in the gym. You've never trained. You're not in shape. And when you do turn up, to the venue, you skirt around and you pussyfoot. Am I lying or am I not lying? What do you think? I'm just being honest. I have to say that. I have to be honest. And it's not a beef thing. I'm not looking to start beef with anybody. I'm not calling anybody in particular out. I'm just saying it shows that the state of journalism in this country is a joke. The state of these so-called YouTube channels out there, because the whole point of these YouTube channels is the ones that have access, the ones that are going to the events every week, right? Interviewing fighters, interviewing promoters. You're supposed to provide insight to the public, aren't you not? Right, that's your job, right? Your job is to ask informative questions that can perform insight, that can give insight to the public. What this whole episode has shown, the last 8 months, right, has shown, or six to whatever months of this whole Conor Benn saga has shown is, it has shown you, right, who really is independent and who is not. And I'm sorry, there's just no fucking way around that. This Conor Benn saga has shown you. It's your barometer to see who in the UK media, and I'm not talking about being unbiased, everybody has biases, right? But I'm talking about who's interested in asking questions and who's not. And it's shown that. Because like I said before, all you need to do is go back and look at Jarrell Miller and look at the outrage towards Jarrell Miller from these same people. Should be banned from the sport for life. Fucking a couple of years later, the same people that were saying Jarrell Miller should be banned for life for failing multiple tests are the same people that are sitting there, literally sitting there on a fucking sitting there and saying shit like, "Well, Conor could be in it. He could be. Maybe he was there all week." What the fuck is going on? So let me just say that, all right? State of journalism in this country is an absolute disgrace. Let's start off with this. Where Simon Jordan, in my opinion, let me tell you one thing right now. I could not have done a better job than Simon Jordan in this interview. Eddie Hearn is no mug. That's what people need to understand about Eddie Hearn, yeah? Like, anybody thinking that someone's just going to come on, yeah, and absolutely destroy Eddie Hearn and, you know, make him crumble in some kind of argument, you know, like what you see sometimes with the car crash interviews when they interview politicians on TV. That's not going to happen. Like, Eddie Hearn is a very, very smart individual. He's one of the most successful, if not the most successful promoter in the world. And he spends all day dealing with sharks and dealing with liars. And if there's anybody who knows how to defect, if there's anybody who knows how to change the argument, if there's anybody who knows how to make it personal and try and take you off your questioning, it's Eddie Hearn. You see the old Eddie Hearn trick. He loves to talk about slapping people. Do you hear that one this morning? As soon as he gets in, right, he was rattled by Simon Jordan. As soon as he got in that fucking studio, he was rattled by Simon Jordan straight away, who actually had quite a strong start. And Hearn says, "Well, I didn't come in. I didn't really come to the interview because I wanted to slap him." Do you hear that? Do you hear that one? When he was questioned, why didn't you come in earlier? Why has it taken you 6 to 7 months, right, to come in and answer some proper questions, yeah? Some proper questions about the nature of those adverse findings from Conor Benn, why Chris Eubank Jr. wasn't appropriately informed about the first test failure, all right, and why it appeared that you were willing to put on a fight, and why it appeared, right, that you were willing to put Chris Eubank Jr. in the ring with somebody who, according to a VADA test, had performance-enhancing drugs in his system, right? And he starts saying, "Oh, well, I didn't come in because, you know, I felt like slapping you." So, you know, it's just the same old shit, really, isn't it? Same old shit from Eddie Hearn, isn't it? Like, and that's when you know, and that's when Simon should have known, that's when you know when you've got him. When he starts trying to, you know, talk about, you know, charity fighting, which he did, talk about, we'll have a charity fight, we'll get it on, I felt like slapping you. Again, like I said before, just bully talk, innit? Bully talk. When it's Jake Paul threatening legal action, when Jake Paul called him out and said, you know, this and that about him, never threatened to slap Jake Paul, never said anything about slapping Jake Paul, never said anything about fucking having a straightener with Jake Paul. It was a completely different story. But we'll move on. He said, right, one of his first things was, when he was asked why he didn't come onto the show earlier, he said, "We did every outlet available." Well, I would say that's slightly inaccurate. Again, Eddie Hearn's very, very clever with his words. Technically, right, when the news broke that Conor Benn had an adverse finding in his dope test, right? Yes, Hearn did technically speak to almost every outlet available. But it's what he said to those outlets. He basically deflected and defected and defected. And then what he turned around and did was, he then gave a 45-minute interview, the only in-depth interview that he'd given in and around that time, to his busy mate, Kugan Cassius. Right? That's where it comes from. That's what the first thing. So when he says he did every outlet available, because the question was, you know, why have you been avoiding questioning? Why have you been avoiding serious questions from people who actually know what they're talking about? I'm not including myself in that. And he said we did every outlet available. Well, what you actually did was, right, when you were actually at the venue, when you was at the press conference, yes, technically you did talk to multiple outlets because they had people there shoving microphones in your face. But really, the one true proper and in-depth interview you did was with your best mate, Kugan Cassius. You never gave 45 minutes to anybody else. You never gave 45 minutes to Rob Tebbett. The reason why you never gave 45 minutes to Rob Tebbett is because you didn't like the kind of questions that Rob Tebbett would ask you. That's why you didn't give a 45-minute interview to Rob Tebbett. You gave a 45-minute interview to Kugan Cassius, who is a self-admitted friend of Conor Benn. Just think of that very, very quickly. Just think of that, right? One of the biggest fighters in this country has 2 adverse findings in the space of XYZ months. And the first interview and the longest interview you give in a 6 to 8 month period is to an individual who is on the record as saying they are a friend of Conor Benn. There you go. Never gave an interview to Rob Tebbett. Won't go on Seconds Out and give and speak with Gabriel Montoya. Won't speak to anybody. Gave his 45-minute interview to Kugan Cassius. Not only that, but the reason why Simon Jordan called him a coward was because the press conference where they declared that the fight was off was a fantastic time to actually answer some questions and get to the truth. See, that would have been the perfect opportunity to catch Eddie Hearn out. It would have been the press conference when they announced that the fight was being cancelled, which is why Eddie Hearn refused to answer any questions. And that's why Simon Jordan called him a coward, yeah? Make sense? Refused to answer any questions at the press conference. So that's my point number 1. He says that, we did every outlet available. Yeah, but like I said before, you did speak to multiple outlets, right? But technically, you didn't give them the amount of time that you gave Kugan Cassius. The real substantive interview was a 45-minute interview with a friend of Conor Benn, okay? And that was done for a reason. So he was avoiding questions. And again, like I said before, we know you was avoiding questions because when it came to that post-fight press conference, you said there were no questions. The reason why, by the way, he said there were no questions is, in my opinion, and I hope the lawyers aren't listening to this, but allegedly, in my opinion, the reason why he refused to answer any questions at the press conference where they announced that the Benn and Eubank fight was off was because he needed to get his story straight. And he didn't want to say anything that would make Conor Benn's situation worse than it already was, right? Let's have a look now, all right? So here's the main crux of his argument. The main crux of his argument, right, is one of the most bizarre arguments I've ever heard, yeah? And I've seen quite a few people saying like that Eddie Hearn won this debate and Eddie Hearn won this debate handily and Simon didn't know what he was talking about. I'm just going to run something by you because what was said here makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. And that is Eddie Hearn's defense. And his main defense was basically saying that contractually he could not pull the fight. Did you hear that? Press 1 if you heard him say that to Simon. He said that to him multiple times. And this was his primary defense, right? And throughout the debate was basically, well, what would you have done, Simon? Contractually, right, I could not have pulled the fight. The only people that can pull the fight contractually are Chris Eubank, right, or the fighters, or one of the fighters, right? So I think he said Chris Eubank or the British Boxing Board of Control. Let me know if I'm accurate in saying that, but I'm pretty sure that was his argument. His argument was that contractually, he had no leeway to stop this fight, and the only people that could have stopped the fight, yeah, were Chris Eubank Jr., right, and the British Boxing Board of Control. All right. Now, that argument, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, is a very, very deceptive, misleading argument, and I'll tell you why. Okay. Eddie Hearn might be right, and I've said this a million times. Contractually, his hands may have been tied. But he could have used his influence and he could have put pressure on the fighters and he could have put pressure on Conor Benn and he could have put more pressure on to make sure the fight didn't happen, and he did not. Did he publicly come out and state that this fight should not happen because Conor Benn had 2 adverse findings in the space of 3 months? The answer is no. I cannot see, and I have not seen any footage of Eddie Hearn, right? When this whole saga was happening, when it was announced that Conor Benn failed a drug test, I didn't see any footage anywhere of Eddie Hearn saying, but you know what? Morally, this fight should not happen. Did anybody ever see that? Did anybody ever see Eddie Hearn say, I would be uncomfortable promoting this fight? This fight, morally, should not happen. I don't want to be a part of this event. Did anybody hear Eddie Hearn say those words? No. No. He put absolutely no... He wants you to believe, right? He wants you to believe that he's the biggest and most successful boxing promoter in the world, on one hand. And then on the other hand, he wants you to believe that he was somehow trapped in a situation he couldn't get out of, where he didn't want to put on this Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr. fight, but his hands were contractually tied and there was nothing that he could have done. He may not have been able contractually to call the fight off himself, but he could have contributed to the fight being called off by putting pressure on the relevant parties. Press 7 if you agree with me, and press 8 if you disagree. He could have put pressure on. Here's what he could have done. He could have come out straight away on all media and said, I am not comfortable putting this fight on. Do you agree with that? Could he have come out and said, he could have said, I am not comfortable. He said, he could have said, I have contractual obligations, but I'll be honest with you, right? Morally, as a person who claims to be an amateur boxer and who claims to have had XYZ fights at Billicoe Boxing Club, I would not feel comfortable promoting this event. Because if anything happens to Chris Eubank Jr., right, then people will hold me responsible for that. So I am not comfortable putting this fight on. He never said that. He never said that. I have not seen any instances. I have not seen any instances of Eddie Hearn putting pressure on anybody. He could have gone to Conor Benn and said, listen, Conor, contractually, I can't call this fight off. But I'll be honest, Conor, I don't want to promote this fight. You've had 2 adverse findings in the space of 2 months. This whole thing stinks. You need to go away and you need to prove your innocence before I promote you again. So I'm not really up for promoting you. Did he do that? No. He done neither of the things. What he did do, right, and we can see that, yeah, and he admitted this and he called it a mistake, was he talked about, well, if the board don't want to put this fight on, we will look into other options. And he admitted that in that interview, which basically means that he wanted to put the fight on. Didn't it? That basically equates to he wanted to put the fight on. Right? He's on camera saying, we will look into other options if the British Board of Boxing Control do not want to put this fight on. Right? That, and those are not the words of somebody who felt uncomfortable with this fight taking place. If he felt uncomfortable with the fight taking place, he wouldn't have been on camera talking about other options, yeah? Or other options in terms of putting the fight on. So he's absolutely and utterly full of shit, yeah? In what he's saying, in what he's saying there. He's trying to get by on a technicality. Yeah, technically, right, he might not have been able to be the sole decision maker in putting the fight off, right? But he could have put a hell of a lot of pressure. He could have put so much pressure on that this fight couldn't have happened. And even if he couldn't have done that, the least he could have done, the least he could have come out and done was he could have come out on camera and said, this is wrong. We've got a fighter who is boiling down to an unsafe weight, 157 pounds, who could potentially be getting in the ring with somebody who has had multiple adverse findings. This is wrong. This is wrong, and he didn't do it. But as I say time and time again, when it was Jarrell, and and let me tell you something before. When it was Jarrell Miller, it was a completely different story. When it was Jarrell Miller, he was talking about people should serve prison time for failing drugs tests. That's what he said. He said people should be facing prison time. I think his exact words were, I'm not talking about banning from the sport. I'm talking about imprisonment. That's literally what he suggested. When Jarrell Miller failed a test, he suggested he had no problem saying that people who failed drugs tests should be imprisoned. And he's equated them and he's made comparisons between people who knowingly go into the ring on performance enhancing drugs and fight other fighters. He's equated them to murderers. He's equated them to murderers. So Eddie Hearn has had no problem taking a moral stance on drug testing, yeah, and drug test failures in the past. The only time he had a problem giving us, yeah, a moral opinion on whether a fight should go ahead or not, yeah, due to a failed drugs test is when one of his own fighters failed the test. So I thought that was quite a big interesting point in the debate there, and I think Simon could have pushed him a little bit more in it, but I could never have done a better job than Simon Jordan. Like I said before, doing this on YouTube on a show by yourself and actually being faced with the man himself are two completely different things. I would have also have asked Eddie Hearn as well, if he didn't want the fight to happen, why was there a joint statement released between Matchroom and Wazerman, right? Because it had the Matchroom company logo on it, all right? It had the Matchroom company logo on it, right? Which was effectively threatening legal action against the British Board of Control for stopping this fight. So again, like I said before, he's trying to get on a technicality. Oh, there's nothing I could have done. There's nothing I could have done. Well, there is actually something you could have done. Do you know what I mean? There is actually something you could have done. You could have not threatened the British Board of Control. You could have not put your company logo on a statement which threatened legal action against the British Boxing Board of Control for wanting to cancel the fight. And you could have publicly come out and said you were uncomfortable with promoting the fight. You could have come out and said in public that you thought it was wrong that the fight should take place. And you could have personally gone to Conor Benn and put pressure on Conor Benn and said, I feel very, very uncomfortable promoting this fight because if anything happens to Chris Eubank Jr., we're going to be in big trouble. You're literally putting Chris Eubank Jr.'s life at risk. Before we move on to the next point, press 9 if you agree with what I'm saying so far, and press 10 if you disagree. He then, we'll get onto that in a second. He then talked about the Billy Joe Saunders fallacy, which Simon did pick him up on, but I think Eddie Hearn managed to get him off the point. Yeah, but again, this bullshit about the board have said they don't recognise VADA. Right. What we need to do right now, as far as I'm concerned, is I need to see this email from the British Boxing Board of Control where they say we don't recognise VADA. We need to see that. Where have they said that? I've never seen any evidence anywhere on this planet, where the British Boxing Board of Control have said we don't recognise VADA testing. I've never seen that before. The only person I've ever heard that from is Eddie Hearn, who claims he has it in some kind of fucking imaginary email. I'd love to fucking see the email from the British Boxing Board of Control to Eddie Hearn to say we don't recognise VADA testing. If it exists, fair play to him, but I'd like to see proof of that, because when you look at the British Boxing Board of Control's rules, I didn't see, when I looked in the section about drug testing, I didn't see anything in the British Boxing Board of Control's rule book. And that's what takes precedence. Would you agree with me, guys? What takes precedence? Fucking emails, which anybody can interpret an email, blah, 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 right? Anybody can read an email and interpret it one way when it was meant another way. What takes precedence? Rules in the fucking rule book or an email from the British Boxing Board of Control? The British Boxing Board of Control have sent me an email saying we don't recognise VADA testing. As far as I'm concerned, nobody else can see that email, Eddie. So whose word are we going to take for that? Yours? I don't think so. I want to see that email. I tell you what we can take from it. Again, bringing up Billy Joe Saunders. Oh, it's the Billy Joe Saunders case. Let's talk about Demetrius Andrade. Let's talk about Billy Joe Saunders. The Billy Joe Saunders case, the BBOC said, we do not recognise VADA test. No, that did not happen. For the 150th time, that's just a straight up lie. Billy Joe Saunders tested positive. Again, I'm sorry, I know you guys have heard this a million times, but just in case if any new listeners are listening today, the Billy Joe Saunders and Conor Benn situations are completely different situations. Billy Joe Saunders tested positive for oxyliphrine. Oxyliphrine is not banned by the World Anti-Doping Agency out of competition when Billy Joe Saunders took the drug. So Billy Joe Saunders would never have failed a VADA test. He would never have failed a UCAD test. He would not have failed it. When he took oxyliphrine, you are allowed to take. Billy Joe Saunders has not violated any UCAD anti-doping rules. He hasn't violated any of them. He took oxyliphrine out of competition. According to the World Anti-Doping Agency, which govern UCAD, you are allowed to take oxyliphrine out of competition. So that was the point. That was part of the reason why the British Boxing Board of Control couldn't do anything about Billy Joe Saunders. It wasn't because we don't recognise VADA. The reason why is because they adhere to UCAD, and UCAD adhere to the World Anti-Doping Agency. And according to the World Anti-Doping Agency, Billy Joe Saunders did not commit any doping violations. Quite simply, if Billy Joe Saunders had taken a UCAD test, he would have passed it with flying colours. Because oxylithrine is only banned in competition. And Billy Joe took it outside of competition. So Billy Joe would have passed the VADA test. Conor Benn would have failed those Billy Joe would have passed the UCAD test. Conor Benn would have failed those UCAD tests. He tested positive for clomiphene. That's banned at all times. If Conor Benn had taken a UCAD test, he would have failed. He violated. By testing positive for clomiphene, if you test positive for clomiphene, you violate the World Anti-Doping Agency rules. Billy Joe Saunders never violated a World Anti-Doping Agency rule because he took it out of competition. Conor Benn took clomiphene, banned at all times. So Eddie Hearn turned it around again and repeatedly trying to equate this Conor Benn situation to the Billy Joe Saunders situation. And saying, well, no, the board don't recognise VADA. The board don't recognise VADA. They've told us in the Billy Joe Saunders situation. I don't believe that was the case unless he manages to come up with this magical email. And if I was Simon, I would have pushed him, show me the email. Let's see the email. Let's see the email. Because the only person who's saying that is you. If you look at the British Boxing Board of Control rulebook, I don't see anything in there which says we don't recognise VADA. Nothing in the fucking rulebook. So again, Simon should have asked him. And again, it's easier said than done. But somebody needs to ask him, what takes precedence? Emails or what's in the fucking rulebook? His next defence. This was hilarious, this one. And it gets better. I hope you guys are enjoying this, but if not, it's alright. And let me just give you a break from it, right? Let me just break it up. There's a lot of people who still don't want to talk about this. Have you noticed that? The deflection tactics online are fucking embarrassing. And it's from those people who are trying to gain access. We all know who they are. People on social media, people on YouTube, people on Twitter who, like I said before, trying to crawl into Eddie Hearn's pants, yeah? So they can rock up at a Matchroom show and get an interview, innit? Listen, let me tell you something, right? You must be living some kind of fucking life, innit? Where you have to crawl up someone's batty so that when you turn up to some shitty boxing event, you can grab an interview and talk about what? Do you know what I mean? Do you know how sad that is? That must be a fucking hell of a life someone's living, I'd like to ask this question. I'd like to know about this, but I can't answer that. I can't ask that. Because if I ask that, then I might not get an interview from Eddie Hearn on my YouTube channel. I might not get an interview, or I can't answer that, or because Eddie Hearn might not talk to me on Twitter no more. Fucking hell, man. What a fucking kind of existence, yeah, did that live? What kind of existence is that to live in? In my opinion, it's not a good one. And we just see nothing but deflection. I've seen it online. Oh, this Conor Benn story's getting old now. Oh, this Conor Benn story's getting old. Yeah, because of course you would. Because you'd rather fucking yap on about what? Joshua fucking Barazzi. You'd rather care about Joshua Barazzi signing with Ben Shalom than fucking Chris Eubank Jr. putting his life at risk. Is that what you want to talk about? You don't want to talk about 157-pound Chris Eubank Jr. who literally boiled himself down to the bone and ended up getting... And people need to remember, Chris Eubank Jr. got knocked out. Something that had never happened to him before in his entire career. Stepped up against George Groves at 168 in the World Boxing Super Series and took every punch that George Groves could give him and didn't go down. He boiled himself down to 157 pounds, and in his next fight he then goes and gets knocked out. Certain individuals in boxing wanted this individual to get in the ring and put his life on the line at Conor Benn. Somebody could have died in that fucking ring. Somebody could have died in that ring or got brain damaged in that ring. Oh, this story's getting old. We don't want to talk about it no more. This story's getting old. How can you be a hardcore boxing fan? This is what gets me with these people. How can you be a hardcore boxing fan, but you don't want to talk? You don't want to talk about somebody dehydrating down to an unhealthy weight, taking photos of themselves on Instagram the day before the weigh-in and looking absolutely like death. You don't want to talk about someone being forced to reduce the cushioning around their brain, and you want that, and you don't want to talk about that person, a weight drained person. When you're drained, when you're dehydrating yourself, when you're sucking the water out of the body the cushioning around the fucking brain is going. You're lowering the cushioning around the brain. And that man was being fucking sent to his fucking... Basically, he was being sent to be executed. In the fucking ring with somebody who had failed fucking 2 tests. But you don't want to talk about that no more because it's inconvenient for you. Because it's inconvenient for your access. Let's just be real. It's inconvenient for your access because what's happened with Matchroom? Let's just be honest and just call it how it is, right? Let's just call it how it is about Matchroom. What's happened here is Matchroom were on top. You want access to their fighters. You want access to Hearn. So you thought you crawl up his backside. Let's just tell it how it is. Let's tell it how it is. The reason you want to stop talking about this isn't for the good of boxing, is it? It's not for the good of boxing. It's not because it's getting old. The reason why you don't want to talk about it is because you'd rather sweep it under the carpet so you can keep getting access to Matchroom shows. You can keep turning up to Matchroom press conferences and you can keep... Because somewhere in your brain you think you're going to be the next Kugan Cassius. Like Kugan Cassius is making shitloads of money out of IFL TV. Hint, hint, I don't think he is. What do you guys think? That's what it is. Like, some of these deluded individuals, they think they're going to be the next Kugan Cassius or something. They're delusional. Go out and get a proper job. Don't rely on YouTube to make income, man. That's my opinion. Like, don't rely on YouTube to make income. Don't be fucking pinning all your hopes and dreams on becoming the next... Oh, I'm going to make this big boxing channel and it's going to be massive. It's going to be massive. It's going to... No, it's not. No, it's not. Wakey, wakey, man. You need to stop being delusional. Wakey, wakey. It ain't never going to become big. It ain't never going to become bigger than IFL TV. It ain't never going to become bigger than IFL TV. So go in there, ask questions. Don't bend over for access. And I'm just being honest, that's the real reason why, again, people don't want to talk about it. Or what is it? They either don't want to talk about it or they want you to talk about Tyson Fury, don't you? Am I lying or am I not lying? They either don't want to talk about it or they want to talk about Tyson Fury or they want to talk about Solane Teti. But let me tell you something right now. How can you claim to be a hardcore fan of boxing but you don't care that a weight-drained man was nearly allowed to get in the ring and get punched in the fucking head with 10-ounce gloves on for Lord knows how long by somebody who had clomiphene in his system, according to VADA? How can you be a so-called hardcore boxing fan and reconcile those two things? How can you be? If you love the sport of boxing, I think you'd be interested in it. Shouldn't you be interested in it? I would be. But no, it's getting boring now. Don't want to talk about it no more. No, the reason why you don't want to talk about it is because it's Matchroom. Let's be honest, man. Let's stop pulling punches. The real reason you don't want to talk about it is because it involves Matchroom. It involves Matchroom. If it involves somebody that was at Matchroom, you'd still be banging on about it. And if it involves somebody that was at Matchroom, Eddie Hearn would still be giving interviews on it left, right and centre and burying them and saying they should never promote in the sport again. Do you think... I've got to be very, very careful what I say. But do you think that... I mean, how do I word this without getting fucking killed by lawyers? Do you think that the conduct of the promoters in the Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn fight, do you think their conduct leads you to believe that these are people that should be allowed to continue to promote fights in the UK? Do you think, let me ask you a question, do you think the conduct of the promoters in the Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn fight makes you think that fighter safety is paramount in boxing? Do you think these fighters are going into the ring and do you think they're being looked after? Do you think these fighters are going to the ring and do you think they're safe? Do you? I'm just out of interest. Do you think the conduct of the promoters in the Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn fight, does that reassure you that these fighters are stepping into the ring and that their best interests are being looked after? According to Eddie Hearn, Chris Eubank Jr. was not informed about the first adverse finding, which I believe was when? Back in July. he was not informed. And the reason why he said he was not informed was because there was some kind of confidentiality. What did he say? Did anybody hear that? WBC confidentiality. Where's the ruling on that? Just out of interest. He's probably telling the truth, but where is that? I would love to see, like, because I don't want to just take someone's word for it there. But do you not think that, if that is the case, do you not think that's a bit of a flaw in the WBC program there? Do you not think? Just think about what he said here. Hold on. Conor Benn had an adverse finding around about July time. Chris Eubank Jr. was not informed that his opponent had failed or had an adverse finding in a drugs test. They said there was some kind of confidentiality clause, which meant that they couldn't inform Chris Eubank Jr. If that's the case, and I need to see evidence that's the case, if that's the case, do you not think the WBC have got very, very serious questions to answer about fighter safety? How can that be right? How can it be right that I'm boiling down to £157 to fight you? You failed a fucking drugs test, but nobody can tell me that you failed a drugs test. What's the obvious consequence of that? Well, the obvious consequence of that is the same thing that happened to Oscar Rivas, isn't it? When he fought Dillian White, where he gets to the ring with somebody and he has no fucking idea what's going on. Do you remember that? Because this ain't the first time this has happened, is it? That's another thing Simon Jordan should have asked. This ain't the first time this has happened, is it? We had the scenario with Oscar Rivas, didn't we? Where he got in the ring with somebody, didn't he? Oscar Rivas. That fucking poor bloke got in the ring with somebody and he had no fucking idea what was in their system, didn't he? He had no fucking clue, did he? Jumped into the ring to get punched in the head and he had no fucking idea what was in that guy's system. So, like I said before, there's a reason why people don't want to talk about it. You don't want to talk about it because, you know, and let's be honest, right? The way to grow a popular social media following or the way to grow, you know, a popular channel or whatever is to be very positive about Matchroom. That's the bottom line of it. Listen, it is what it is. It is what it is. That's the way to build a following. Let's move on. So Chris Eubank Jr. wasn't informed due to some kind of confidentiality agreement. What about my man Frank Smith here? Frank Smith. I would have asked the question. And again, see, I'm asking the question. So I'm not just blaming Eddie Hearn, and the British Boxing Board of Control aren't blame free, by the way. Let me get that. But I'm talking about Simon Jordan and Eddie Hearn's interview, right? I would have asked about this man, Frank Smith. No joke. I would love to ask Frank Smith this question, you know, and it's probably a really good answer. There's probably a really, really good answer for it. Maybe, you know, maybe it's just a question that somebody's never asked him, right? But if anybody gets hold of Frank Smith before I do, can somebody please ask Frank Smith the following question? Frank Smith, what's Frank Smith's position? Is Frank Smith the director of Matchroom or is he the CEO, right? Could somebody ask Frank Smith this question, please? Frank Smith, in July, right? In July, did you find out in July that Conor Benn had an adverse finding in a drugs test? Did you find that out, Frank Smith? Did you find out in July when Eddie Hearn found out that Conor Benn, did you find out in August, the test was taken in July, but the results came out in August. Did you find out before the fight that Conor Benn had an adverse finding from a test taken in July? Did you find that out? And if you did find that out, did you not tell him? Fuck all this contractually. What is this stuff? He's your brother-in-law. He's your fucking brother. You're sleeping in the same bed as his fucking sister. He's your brother-in-law. Frank Smith, my question to you would be, did you know about Conor Benn's adverse finding? And when you knew about it before the fight, did you not tell Chris? Did you not tell his sister? You not tell his sister, did you? When you went home that night, you not tell your wife who is his sister. Listen, don't say you heard it from me. You never heard this from me. But I've got to tell you because he's your brother. Somebody failed a fucking dope test. Well, you didn't tell him. So he never fucking knew. He never fucking knew. No one's asking that question. No one's asking that question about Frank Smith. Sleeps in the same bed as Eubank's sister. Did you or did you not tell Eubank or give Eubank any indication that he was about to go in the ring and get punched in the fucking head by somebody who'd failed 2 tests? Because if the answer's no, well, I'll leave the rest for you to decide on that. That's something that I would have asked about Frank Smith. Nobody's managed to ask Frank. Again, you have to ask the question. All these people are getting all this access. And then they can't even ask the most basic of fucking questions. Am I lying or am I not lying? They can't. How many times have we seen Frank Smith on IFLT? We've seen Frank Smith talking about Joshua Bratzi. Maybe Umar asked him in this interview. Maybe I got it wrong and Umar did ask him. But I need to know. Let me know. But I've never heard anybody ask him that. Right. A few more bits. And then I'll get to your questions. Frank Smith. Simple question. Did you know in August, when Eddie Hearn found out, did you know that Conor Benn had an adverse finding? If the answer is yes, right, given that you're his brother-in-law and that his sister's your wife, did you tell them? If the answer's no, I'll leave the rest to you. Right, let's move on. Eddie Hearn is saying Conor Benn's clear to fight. Because Simon rightly asked the question, right? Simon rightly asked the question about how can you continue to promote this guy when he hasn't proven his innocence? Actually, let me go back to this. Eddie Hearn categorically said, I believe Conor Benn is innocent. Right? We all heard that, right? Type in yes if you heard that, right? We all heard Eddie Hearn on this interview categorically say, I believe that Conor Benn is innocent. Right? I would have asked the honest question. Maybe I wouldn't have. Like I said before, I could not have done... Let me make this clear. I could not have done a better job than Simon Jordan. If you put me in a debate with Eddie Hearn, I would get absolutely destroyed. Eddie Hearn's on another level to me. I am not delusional. This man is a professional negotiator. All he deals with is sharks, liars, cheaters on a daily basis. If there's anybody who knows how to defect, lie, do anything, it's Eddie. He does it for a living. So let me make that clear. I'm not delusional. Right? If you got Eddie Hearn called into this show right now live, I get fucking destroyed as well. I think Simon Jordan did a tremendous job. So what I'm saying is, I'm saying things after the fact. It's easy to point things out in hindsight, right? We can all do that. But when we're in the heat of the moment, it's a different story. So let me just make that clear. I am not fucking stupid. Okay? He said he believes Conor Benn is innocent. My question would have been, how the fuck can you believe Conor Benn is innocent when you look at his actions? His actions are the exact opposite of what you would expect from somebody who's fucking innocent. And again, I want to make this clear. I'm not accusing Conor Benn of anything. What I'm saying is, Eddie Hearn is saying he believes Conor Benn is innocent, right? I'm saying, when you logically look at his actions, why would you believe he's innocent? What grounds has he given you, Eddie Hearn, to believe he is innocent? It's been 6 to 8 months. He claims he has a 270-page document which gives evidence which could help prove that he's innocent. Yet he refuses to hand it to the British Boxing Board of Control. Are those the actions of somebody? Are those the actions of an individual who you would think, yeah, I believe he's innocent? What, he's sitting on a 270-page document that he believes proves that his tests were contaminated, and it's got all this scientific evidence in it, and he's been paying all this money for all these high-powered lawyers, but he can't show the document to the British Boxing Board of Control. When he was asked by Piers Morgan, why don't you just hand it over to the British Boxing Board of Control then, so they can exonerate you? And he said, oh, well, I can just fight somewhere else. That's what he said, right? Well, I can just fight somewhere else. That doesn't exactly engender confidence in me that he's telling the truth. I'm just saying, I'm just giving my opinion. I'm not accusing Conor Benn of anything. I'm just giving my opinion. That doesn't exactly engender any confidence in me. I wouldn't be rushing on TalkSport in front of Simon Jordan saying, oh, I've talked to Tony Sims, I've talked to his dad, you know, I've had him in my office and I believe he's innocent. So, he's taken 2 tests in X amount of months. And according to those VADA tests, he had clomiphene in his system. As far as I'm aware, no explanation has ever been provided to the British Boxing Board of Control. And the second thing that Simon tried to push him on and he couldn't answer was the following. Have his lawyers tried to obstruct the British Boxing Board of Control's investigation? Because Robert Smith categorically went on TalkSport and said the following. Robert Smith said that as soon as he found out about Conor Benn's test, the lawyers were on the phone and he said in this interview, which you can see right here, I'm not playing the footage, but you can see it in this interview, Robert Smith turned around and said that lawyers got in contact with him and said, this has nothing to do with you, the British Boxing Board of Control. You can't investigate this. This has nothing to do with you. You can only deal with failed UCAD tests. You can't deal with failed VADA tests. Leave this between us and the WBC. You have no say. You have no jurisdiction over this matter. That's what Robert Smith is saying. So is Robert Smith a liar then, Eddie Hearn? Is he lying or not lying? Simon kept saying, was there a cease and desist? Forget a cease and desist. I would simply ask him, is Robert Smith lying? Robert Smith for the British Boxing Board of Control is saying that lawyers got in touch with him and the first thing they told him was, you can't investigate this because he didn't fail a UCAD test. So you've got nothing to do with this. Is Robert Smith lying? If Robert Smith is not lying, does that sound like somebody who's complying with the British Boxing Board of Control investigation? No, it does not. So why would you believe that somebody who has failed 2 drugs tests or has had 2 adverse findings in the space of 3 months and refuses to comply with a British Boxing Board of Control investigation is innocent? Where's the fucking logic in that? I'm not even saying that you have to think he's guilty. Does that make sense? I'm not even saying you have to say. I'm not even expecting Eddie Hearn to say, well, Conor's guilty. I'm not saying Conor's guilty. But I'm saying when I look at the evidence and when I look at the way he's handled the case, I have to be honest. The first conclusion that I rush to isn't he's innocent. Let's go put on a fight between him and Manny Pacquiao out in Dubai. Press 1 if you're with me on that, or press 2 if you disagree with that. Eddie Hearn saying he believes Conor Benn is innocent. Based on what? What has he said or what has he done to make you think that he's innocent? Because according to the British Boxing Board of Control, they've received no explanation and they've been obstructed from investigating. And they still haven't received this 270-page document. And all we've heard is there's some kind of alleged conspiracy. That the BBOC have got a conspiracy against Conor Benn. Makes no fucking sense whatsoever. It's very, very convenient, isn't it? I thought Simon did a great job of trying to nail Eddie Hearn down to that, to the best of his ability. Oh, he's been cleared to fight. He's been cleared to fight. Has he been cleared to fight? The WBC have allowed him back in the rankings. They're just a sanctioning body. Can the WBC clear you to fight? Who's been cleared to fight? Well, by who? Who's cleared him to fight? As far as I'm aware, there's an ongoing investigation by the British Boxing Board of Control / UCAD. That investigation hasn't finished. Who's cleared him to fight? The WBC. I wasn't aware the WBC could clear him to fight. Who's cleared him to fight? Who has cleared him to fight? And that goes into his next argument, and we're nearly done. And then I'll go through your comments. The British Boxing Board of Control took too long. And that was the crux of his argument, wasn't it? I couldn't do anything. I couldn't put the fight off. I couldn't put the fight off. My hands were contracted. Do you know what? Shall I tell you what? And Simon, just probably one of Simon Jordan's best bits in his bang on. Let me tell you something right now. If Eddie Hearn is signing contracts with fighters, right? Just think of the logic of this. And this is why, to be honest with you, right? And I'm going to be honest with you. Anybody who thinks Eddie Hearn won this debate, it does really boggle the mind for me, especially when he makes this statement. Eddie Hearn sat on TalkSport today between the hours of 11 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon and wants us to believe that when he signs a contract with a fighter to promote an event, there is absolutely no way that he can call that fight off. And that the only people that can call that fight off is the British Boxing Board of Control. That's to me. Maybe I've misunderstood. Eddie, if I've misunderstood, I apologise. But it looked like your argument between the hours of 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. on TalkSport today was that when you engage in a contract for a fight, when you sign contracts with the fighters, you have no power to turn around and say, I'm not promoting this fight. I'm just not promoting it. That's it. I've changed my mind. I don't like the way you spoke to me. I don't like something racist you said. I don't like something you said about this. Do you know what? I'm not going to promote this fight. Does that sound like one of the dumbest contracts you've ever fucking heard in your life? Coming from Eddie Hearn, who runs Matchroom, who are a $100 million company. That you would sign up in some kind of contract to promote a boxing event where you have no say as to whether you want to continue promoting the event or not. So what? Eddie Hearn's turning around and saying, there's nothing I could have done. I couldn't have called the fight off. Could you have chosen not to promote it? Eddie Hearn. See how clever he is with wording. Oh, there's nothing I could have done. I couldn't have contractually. I couldn't have called the fight off. Couldn't have called the fight off. Could you have opted to not promote the fight, Eddie? Could you have opted to say, do you know what? You failed 2 drugs tests. I don't want anything to do with this. I don't want Matchroom's name being dragged through the mud. I'm not promoting this. That's interesting. That's an interesting choice of words from Eddie, isn't it? I couldn't have called the fight off. Well, could you have chosen not to promote it? Could you have said the fight can go ahead, but we're not promoting it, Eddie? Because if you couldn't, that sounds like one of the dumbest contracts of all fucking time, isn't it? That has to be one of the dumbest contracts I've ever heard of. Where a promotional organisation would sign a contract with 2 fighters and not have an out clause whereby they could just not promote it for whatever reason. So once Eddie Hearn signs a contract with Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn, according to himself, he has no choice but to promote the fight? Does that sound right to you? Or does that sound like bullshit? That's why when people say Eddie done well in the debate today, I don't see how anybody can come to that conclusion. Do you honestly believe that when Matchroom Boxing put fights on with fighters, do you honestly believe that when Matchroom Boxing put a fight on involving 2 fighters, that they don't have some kind of out where if they don't want to promote the fight anymore, they can't promote it? What? So once they sign the contract, that's it. They have to promote it regardless of what happens, regardless of what's said. Unless the British Boxing Board of Control come in and call it off. Is that what you believe? That sounds... Does that sound right to you? Because that sounds bizarre to me. I suspect what Eddie Hearn's done is a clever choice of words. Does that make sense? I suspect contractually he might not have been able to call the fight off, but contractually he may have been able to say, I am not promoting this fight. Can you see the difference in the wording? Again, like I said before, this is not the actions of somebody who is interested. This is my opinion now, okay? This is not the actions of somebody who is interested in clean boxing. That's my opinion. Makes sense? You see how slimy and slippery these people get with wording? The difference between not being able to call a fight off and not promoting it. You see when people get all slimy with their wording? Slimy with their choice of wording. Do you believe that these people are truly interested in keeping the sport clean? Do you believe this is the first time this has ever happened? Where someone's had a couple of test failures and the fight's gone ahead and we haven't known about it? I'll bet you any money it's not. Bet you any money it's not. Is that the first time? You reckon it's the first time this happened? Because let me tell you something. These fucking guys seem to know what to do. When someone fails a fucking test, yeah, these guys seem to know what the fuck they're doing, don't they? They seem to be rather prepared, innit? It's almost as if it's happened before. It's almost as if it's happened before, innit? So I will go through all your comments in a sec. Let me just go through my final things and I'll go through your comments. I don't know how anybody didn't pick up on that. I mean, his main argument is absolute lunacy. Lunacy. You would sign a contract between Conor, Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. so that whatever happened, so unless the British Boxing Board of Control tell you otherwise, you would have to promote it. You would have no choice but to promote it. I personally don't believe that. I would like to see that contract. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I do not believe that Matchroom Boxing can agree to promote fights. I don't believe somebody as clever, especially Barry Hearn of all people. You think Barry Hearn of all people? You think Barry Hearn has got Matchroom signing contracts with fighters whereby they can't choose to turn around and not promote the event once it's signed? That's what Eddie wants you to believe. That's the stupidity of his argument. That's what he wants you to believe. Once we sign the contract, that's it. We can't not promote the fight. That's it. That's it. Only the British Boxing Board of Control. Only the British Boxing Board of Control can stop it from happening. Are you what the fuck? Do you know how fucking stupid that is? It's one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in my entire life. Who can hear that argument and think that's an argument that makes sense? What the fuck? Toby Larone says Barry Hearn is an accountant. Of course, if you bring his company into disrepute. So you telling me right now, right? If Matchroom signed a contract for a fight between me and Toby Larone, yeah, and I turn around and say, right, very, very bad things about Eddie and Barry Hearn, yeah? So I do the press conference and I say incredibly personal things about Eddie Hearn, his wife, his kids, his mother, and I say things about Barry Hearn and a certain island, and I say all these things. You're telling me that Matchroom contractually can't turn around and say, we're not promoting this fight? Are you fucking nuts? Whoever's writing them contracts, Eddie, needs to be fucking fired, innit? Eddie Hearn. Whoever's writing these contracts needs to... Or it's all a lie. I know which one I believe it is. Or it's just clever wording and bullshit. I know which one I believe. The British Boxing Board of Control took too long. They had months, Eddie Hearn says. They had months. Well, we know why they had months, innit? We know why they had months, innit? It looks like they've had months because they can't get a straight answer from Conor Benn. Right, let's I think we're done with that. So let me give you the conclusion. I mean, it was what I expected. To be honest, I actually think Simon Jordan did a lot better than I was expecting, and I think he did very, very well. Again, people will criticise Simon Jordan and say he didn't ask the right questions. Again, me personally, people will say ultras, but I mean, people will say ultras, but it's the same, it's the same idiots who are just crawling up the backside for access. Same idiots who are crawling up the backside for extra views on Twitter, extra views on YouTube. Listen, right? Listen. When money gets involved, let me tell you something right now. You might not like me, all right? You might disagree with the thing. Oh, by the way, if you can hit the like button, because I really am putting my arse on the line by delivering this episode to you in the middle of lunchtime. Like, I am really putting my arse on the line doing this. I should actually be doing some form of work instead of doing this. So we've had about 100 people here today. Obviously, we're not going to have as many people because it's not prime time. It's the middle of the day. So I appreciate you listening when you can. If you can all hit the like button, that'd be fantastic, right? We've still got nearly 100 people on here, right? But The things to take away from this interview were the following. Oh, yeah, we'll go through the comments on TalkSport. All right, MC, we'll do that. We'll go through the comments. Things to take away from this interview are the following. Eddie Hearn is a very, very clever individual. For those people who don't like Eddie Hearn, yeah, let me tell you something. Just because you don't like somebody, don't underestimate somebody. Whether you like somebody or not, there's plenty of people I don't like, and they are far more intelligent than me. Eddie Hearn is a very, very smart individual. He's a guy who negotiates contracts. He's a guy who negotiates with sharks, other promoters, TV companies, fighters. He does nothing but drive a hard bargain day in and day out. He's a very, very smart individual. And if anybody out there who's getting any clever ideas that you're just going to walk onto some imaginary platform and, trip this guy up and blah, 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 I don't think it's going to happen. You've got to give the guy credit. The guy is very, very clever. He's very, very clever with his wording. You've got to give him credit for coming on TalkSport for the interview. Obviously, you wanted him, the key is he's come on 6 months to 8 months later. And the reason he's done that, and again, is the timing is everything. If you give me 6-7 months to get my story straight, it's a different story, isn't it? What you want to do is you want him to come on TalkSport when the matter happens. Makes sense? You want him to come on TalkSport when the matter happens. You don't want him to come on TalkSport 8 months later when him, his fighter, his lawyers, the TV companies, and everybody all involved, right, have got time to come up with some kind of story in it. So that's it. But you've got to give Eddie Hearn credit for coming on. He's a very smart and clever individual, and he's not a mug. That's one thing I'll say about Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn is no mug. That guy is no joke. He's no mug. And if you think you're just going to bring him onto your show and roll over him, I'm telling you, it ain't going to happen. Simon Jordan did a fantastic job. Anybody, people are saying, oh, Simon Jordan didn't ask the right. I mean, if you look at that interview compared to the garbage that Kugan Cassius delivers. Right? Am I right or wrong? Right? If you look at that piece of programming that we got today, 8 months too late, 6 to 8 months too late, right? Nevertheless. But if you look at that piece of programming that we got today from Simon Jordan, that was infinitely better than any kind of rubbish I've ever seen, from fucking Kugan Cassius, who should retire, in my opinion. Who should retire from being in front of the camera. And like I said before, Simon Jordan has shown that there is an inherent problem in this in boxing media. It's shown there's an inherent problem. It stinks. That's what Simon Jordan has shown. It's matey, it's clicky, and it fucking stinks. And you know what? Let me make it clear, and then we'll go through the comments on the TalkSport thing. I don't care if you're biased or unbiased. I don't give a shit about that, right? I'm not saying everybody should be unbiased. Everybody's got biases, right? Journalists have their biases. You see journalists all the time on TV. Some are pro-Tory, some are pro-Labour. Everybody's got a bias. Every human being on this planet is biased about something. So don't listen to any of these idiots who talk about being unbiased. I'm unbiased. Nobody is unbiased. Nobody. It's bullshit. Nobody is unbiased, right? But when you start taking money from the public, you have a duty, in my opinion, to hold yourself to a different standard. That's where I draw the line. When you start taking money from people, via Super Chat or via Patreon or via Cash App or however you do it, when you start taking money out of people's pockets under the guise that you're going to provide some insight into boxing, then you should provide insight for the money that you took out of those people's pockets. What's going on in this country is that people are taking money out of people's pockets under the guise that they're going to provide some kind of insight about boxing. And then when the moment of truth comes, they provide no insight at all. Press 1 if you agree with me. Press 2 if you disagree with me. That's the problem. That's why I draw the line. when you start taking money off people, hard-working people's money, people who work fucking 2 jobs, 3 jobs, got kids, got wives, whatever. These people are giving you hard-earned money so you can sit in front of a fucking microphone in some fucking crummy boxing stadium asking crummy questions. If you take money off people under the guise that you're going to provide insight, then you need to provide insight. But that's not what happens in this country, is it? People are taking your money. They're taking your money and they're running with it, aren't they? Am I lying or am I not lying? Is that not what's happening? I think that's what's happening, isn't it? They're taking your hard-earned money, and like I said before, you can say what you want about me, but I ain't paying these people's rent. Do you know what I mean? I have people come on and call me all kinds of names. They call me all kinds of names and say this and that, but you know what? You can call me whatever you want. Guess what? I ain't paying these people's rent. In my opinion, that grown man needs to go out and get a job and stop fucking around pretending to run a YouTube channel. That grown man needs to go out and get a proper job and stop fucking around on Twitter pretending to run a social media page. I would never fund these people's lifestyles. Are you mad? They need to grow up, mate. They need to grow up. Get a real job and earn a real living and provide for your family and do a decent, honest and hard-working day's work. Provide a service and claim money for a service instead of claiming money for this social media bullshit. Right, sorry about this. Let's just go through the rest of these comments. Right, we'll do the TalkSport comments and then we'll do your comments. I'm sorry that I've been ignoring you. Right, let's go through this. Where's the live? Oh, Jesus, this is good. They've already removed the live video, probably so they can clip it up and stop people from nicking it. Let's have a look at this one. This is Eddie Hearn saying he believes Conor Benn. Let's have a look at the comments for this. And I'll go through them. Simon's reaction when Eddie Hearn says he believes Conor Benn. It's just laughable, isn't it? How can anybody... Anyway. Don't know how you guys feel about that. Drop me a comment. I believe Benn because Benn is a good boy, Eddie. This guy says Eddie wanted the fight to go ahead despite the failed drugs tests. He wasn't alone in that, but that's what he wanted. Mr. Rick says, I swear I heard Eddie Hearn say the B sample has been tested, but he never said what the results was. Well, we know what the fucking results were, don't we? They're claiming contamination, aren't they? They're claiming contamination and they're saying that there was a problem with the process, right? Something to do with the fact that Conor Benn wanted one of his representatives to be there when the B sample was tested. And they wouldn't allow one of his representatives or fucking quote-unquote scientists to be around there when the B sample was tested. That must mean that there's something wrong with the B sample, or that must mean that there's something wrong with the process. Listen, mate, at the end of the day, there were 2 tests done over... And there were 4 samples. 2 tests, 4 samples. How many of these samples are contaminated? Just out of interest. Were all 4 of them, or just 1? Am I right in saying that? 2 tests, 4 samples, and A and B for both, right? So how many of these samples are contaminated then? Well, all 4 of them. Well, in 3 months, yeah? Fuck me. VADA must not be the fucking gold standard that you said they were, Eddie, which Simon didn't actually ask him. You said VADA was the fucking gold standard. What? So are VADA still the gold standard, Eddie Hearn? Are VADA the gold standard for drug testing? Are VADA the gold standard for drug testing? You said that Buatsi and Pascal, you didn't want Buatsi to fight Pascal because there was no VADA testing. That's what you said. Literally like a couple of months before Conor Benn had a problem with a VADA test. Didn't you say that, Eddie? Could have sworn you went on camera and told everybody that you didn't want Buatsi and Pascal to happen because you weren't happy with the lack of VADA testing. 2 seconds later, you're promoting somebody who's saying that the VADA testing isn't fucking accurate or that it's contaminated. Hold on. Innit? Am I right on that? Man turned around and said in it that he wasn't he wasn't happy with the drug testing. He wasn't happy with the VADA testing of John Pascal. And he, you know what I mean? It's just the fucking contradictions are fucking absolutely endless. So let me carry on reading these comments. Oh shit! So I got sidetracked, didn't I? Let's see what the public's saying. Haha! Eddie said what I was thinking the whole way through. Simon loves the sound of his own voice. Brilliant. Pissed myself laughing. I do think he does love the sound of his own voice. But listen, like I said, you have to be narcissistic to make $100 million like Simon Jordan did. Simon's a bell end. Here we go. Somebody's got it. 151. Eddie said he pulled the fight. But earlier, he said he wasn't contractually able to stop the fight. I did notice that. I'm not yet. I think Eddie said that once the British Boxing Board of Control said they didn't want to put the fight on, he said he stopped the fight immediately. He pulled the plug immediately. He said he could have continued with the fight, but he chose not to. That, which in my opinion is bullshit, but it is what it is. Isn't Simon something else? A man who claims to know it all. Master of football, master of boxing, master of politics, master of life, master of everything, master of food, and he's never wrong. What a man. I don't know what you think about that. I would love to see someone attack his arguments. What do you guys think? Seems to be a lot of attacking of Simon Jordan, the person, which again is a sign that somebody has no fucking argument. Hence Eddie Hearn saying shit like this. Look, I wanted to slap Simon Jordan. I wanted to give Simon a slap. Sign of somebody who knows they're going to get rattled. They've got no argument, right? Attack the person, right? Play the man. Don't play the ball. If you think Simon Jordan lost this debate, by all means, let me know. But just let me know why you think he lost the debate. I'm not saying he was right about everything he said. I'm sure he got certain things wrong, right? And he did get certain things wrong during the interview. But do you think Simon Jordan lost the debate? Just tell me, what do you think? Because to me, even though Simon Jordan was incorrect and Eddie Hearn did prove him wrong about a couple of things regarding contracts and contractual obligations, right? To me, I don't see anything in that interview from Eddie Hearn that makes me feel comfortable with his actions in the run-up to this fight being pulled. And it certainly doesn't shed Conor Benn in a good light at all, by the way. Eddie handled this like a pro. Simon wasn't as chirpy as he said he would be. Simon the hindsight king. Nice to see Eddie being grilled, unlike IFL TV and others, not sticking it on him for fear of loss of access. So this guy's commented twice now. Simon's a bell end. So I'm sure he's commented a couple of times, but I could be wrong. Maybe I didn't. Or maybe I haven't. Sorry, maybe I've read that before. Try and see here. Eddie, man, he's good. Let's have a look. Brilliant from Simon. This is the type of question that we need in boxing. Guys, get your questions and I'll go through them all in a sec. All of them. Let's have a look. I've not read his defense, but I believe him anyway. I don't think he was contaminated by eggs, but I'm happy to accept that finding. Oh, he's talking about Eddie Hearn. So Eddie Hearn saying, I've not read his defense, but I believe him anyway. Because Eddie Hearn said he hadn't read the 270-page document, but he'd seen points in it. It's a good point, isn't it? So Nigel Barker's saying this about Eddie Hearn. I've not read his defense, but I believe him anyway. I don't think he was contaminated by eggs, but I'm happy to accept that finding. I'm guided by the board until they pull the fight. I'm guided by the board until they pull the fight, then I'll kick off and threaten to sue. I think the board were right to pull the fight, but they should have done so straight away. Despite me accepting they were in a difficult position. Cheers, Eddie. Yeah, I agree, Yo King. It seems... The thing about the Conor Benn thing, and I forgot to say this is... And I don't really know much about it myself, but it's a very, very technical conversation, isn't it? Because you're talking about rules, regulations, failed tests. Do you know what I mean? It's very, it's a very technical conversation. And it's a conversation that goes over the head of a lot of people. So, you know, what do people do in it? You know what I mean? You know, they judge it on who sounds like this. It's like with politics, isn't it? You know, politics. Most people who vote don't have any idea what they're voting for. Like, I would say 90% of people who vote in this country don't actually have any idea of what they're voting for. It basically comes down to who's going to give me the most free stuff, which they never do. They get in power and they take it all back. But it comes down to basically who's going to give me the most free stuff. That's what people vote for. Who's going to give me the most free stuff? And, you know, who do I like the sound of? That's how people vote. You've all seen the videos on YouTube of people actually going out to voters, yeah? And asking voters about their voting intentions, right? We've all seen them, right? 99% of voters don't have a fucking clue what they're voting for. They couldn't tell you a fucking policy. You've seen the videos, right? when they've gone out on the street with all sorts, right? And they've, you know what I'm talking about. Chris Sylvester here in the comments says, who is Eddie Hearn trying to convince? He doesn't believe Conor Benn, but because he's invested a lot in him, he has no choice but to follow through with it. By doing so, he's just making himself look more like an absolute tit. We all know and this is not my opinion. I'm reading a comment, okay? The comment says, we all know Conor Benn is guilty. I'm glad Simon literally destroyed Eddie Hearn. Simon's face was an absolute picture when he said he's backing Conor. Right, let me go and read through your comment. Oh my God. Jesus Christ. Jesus. I'm waiting for that as well. It's cringy, innit? A body language analysis of Eddie Hearn. Conor Benn's innocent based on a body language analysis. Right, let's go through all your fucking comments here. I saw Daryl was here. Daryl, if you're listening, I need to get onto you. But if I still have a channel soon, I need to get onto you about doing a show for Anthony Joshua versus Jermaine Franklin. All right, let's go. Brian Burke. Simon Jordan used to own Crystal Palace. He knows a lot about sport. LD Phoenix. The fact Simon Jordan even had $1 million to lose is impressive. Chris Watkins says, these YouTube journalists need views, so they need the big names and they need to massage their egos in order to get their income. That's the problem. Honestly, anybody who's claiming money, but I would be wary. I've said it and I'll say it again. Anybody who's claiming money, you need to be wary of, in my opinion. Simon Jordan with the win. Adam Catterall would destroy Eddie. Adam Catterall will be interesting because Adam Catterall's got quite a bit of knowledge, hasn't he? But we'll see. I mean, look, Simon did a fantastic job, and Eddie Hearn is what he is. Chevon, they don't ask hard questions because it's access management for them. If you rely on YouTube journalism for income, then you have to behave that way, or it's eviction. Iron says Rob Tebbett has been disappointing. I don't think so. I think Rob Tebbett can't get an interview. Can he? Rob Tebbett can't get an interview, and he can't get an interview for a reason. Rob Tebbett can't get a proper sit-down interview. That's what they do. They waited like 6 months, and then they start talking because they're hoping people are going to forget. Simon H says they don't care about being journalists. They just want to be involved in a sport. Of course. If you want to be involved in a sport, go to the gym. Oh, I've got something to tell you about that in a minute as well, quickly. Simon Jordan was well ahead when Hearn hit him below the belt with your skint, Jordan, and Simon looked ruffled by it. Why? Simon Jordan's a self-made millionaire. Eddie Hearn inherited money from his dad. Nothing to be worried about there. Dench says, I still can't believe they're trying to push the WBC rubbish. Tim says they have to keep licking Eddie's bottom to get access. Right, so questions about access, this and that. Daryl says Eddie Hearn won that debate too slick. Daryl, I should have got you on, You can explain that to me, Daryl. I'm an idiot for not reading that comment, Big Dazza. Dazza, if you're in, if you want to talk about it, it's not too late for you to jump on and come in. Let me know. Let me know. If anybody's got a strong opinion on it, on who they thought won, let me know. Actually, I'm quite interested. Drop me a comment if you've got a strong opinion. Toby says, my blood was boiling when Eddie said Benn's going to fight regardless of him clearing his name. Again, that tells you all you need to know about Eddie Hearn's stance on drug cheating in boxing. Like I said before. Like I said, and this is the point I forgot to mention, and this is a really, really good point, right? And we have to ask this, right? And really, somebody should ask Eddie Hearn this. How do you know that Conor Benn isn't on performance enhancers? How can you put Conor Benn in the ring against the Manny Pacquiao in Dubai with any kind of confidence that he's not on performance enhancing drugs when you look at the way that this case has gone in the last 6 months? Press 1 if you think that's a fair question, and press 2 if you disagree. As a promoter, knowing what you know about the case and seeing the actions of Conor Benn in the last 6 to 8 months, right? And I'm not making any allegations. I'm just talking about what I see as his actions in the last 6 to 8 months. Refusing to hand over the 270-page, basically refusing to hand over evidence that would help his case to the British Boxing Board of Control, right? Allegedly lawyers telling the British Boxing Board of Control that they don't have any say in this matter because he didn't fail a UCAT test. Refusing to answer questions at a press conference. Eddie Hearn refusing to answer questions at a press conference. Conor Benn going on Piers Morgan and saying,
Well, why don't you just hand over this evidence to the British Boxing Board of Control? Well, I can't be bothered. I can just go and fight somewhere else. Two adverse findings for the same substance in inside 4 months or whatever it was, right? I think it was inside 3 months. Two adverse findings for the same substance on 2 separate tests inside a 4-month period from somebody who's refusing to give or supply any information or supply information to the British Boxing Board of Control that would allegedly help his case. How can you feel comfortable about allowing somebody like that to turn up in Dubai and punch a 44-year-old Manny Pacquiao in the head? Is that sufficient evidence to prove to you as a promoter that, look, this guy is 100%, does that make sense what I'm saying, guys? If you was a promoter and you looked at how he went about it, has he given you and proved to you sufficiently that it's acceptable to put him in the ring and let him punch somebody else in the head with 10-ounce gloves on? Because from where I'm standing and from where most people are standing, right, he hasn't proven his innocence at all. At all. At all. He hasn't proven his innocence to general public. He hasn't proven his innocence to Domino's Pizza, who are out there taking the piss out of him. He hasn't even proven his innocence to Domino's Pizza. So if he hasn't proven his innocence to fucking Domino's Pizza and they're out there making fucking Conor Benn special pizzas with eggs everywhere because the guy's become such a laughing stock. If you haven't proved to Domino's fucking Pizza that you're a clean athlete, how can you prove to a promoter that you're a clean athlete? Where's the proof? Like, how does Eddie Hearn literally say, yeah, I think this guy's clean, I'm going to put him in the ring with a 44-year-old Manny Pacquiao? Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like, where does the confidence come from? I would have asked Eddie Hearn that. Before you put him in the ring and allow him to punch another opponent in their head on a show that you're affiliated with, shouldn't there be like a sufficient burden of proof on Conor Benn that goes beyond coming into your office and getting on his knees and crying or hearing from Tony Sims? Is that the burden of proof to Matchroom Boxing? I would ask that question. Is that Matchroom Boxing's burden of proof? If you want to prove to us that you're a clean athlete, turn up in Eddie Hearn's office and get on your knees and cry. And then Tony Sims comes in as a chat with you. And then we believe you. That's it. We're going to let you go into the ring and possibly endanger somebody's life. I personally wouldn't feel comfortable putting that fight on at all. Right. Let me quickly say this and then I'll leave it. Thanks for staying with me on this one. The show hasn't done huge numbers, but I think time of day has something to do with that. Iron says, oh, you've just reminded me, Ultra. I have a question about boxing gyms. How do you know if a gym is a sweet science gym where they actually teach you, or whether it's an apples and pears, jab, rubbish gym? 90% of gyms are apples and pears gyms. And also, you have to factor in, when you go into a boxing gym, mate, you're not going to... They don't know you, and they don't even know if you're any good. So they're not going to devote all their attention to you. They're going to tell you some basics and take your money and get the fuck out of there, for the most part. Do you know what I mean? But it is what it is. Right. I'll ask some more about that in a bit. Because, it's an interesting question. Let me say this before I go. People say, one of my biggest criticisms that I get is, Ultra's elitist, right? Ultra's really elitist. Like, Ultra believes that if you haven't been in a boxing ring, you really shouldn't be talking about boxing. Ultra's elitist. Let me tell you, I am, compared to some of the people I know, one guy in particular who's a friend of mine, I am not elitist at all. I've got a friend of mine who he won't get into the ring really and spar with people who are white collar. He wouldn't even. It's not even that he doesn't think that people who don't put gloves on know nothing about boxing. Like, he won't spar. He won't get in a ring with someone, for the most part, who's not an amateur boxer. He doesn't. Like, he thinks like, look, I've trained, I'm an amateur boxer, I haven't cut any corners. Why should I get in the ring with some random Mickey Mouse YouTuber? Or why should I get in the ring with some random guy? Or why should I get in the ring with some boxer-sized guy? Or why should I get in the ring with someone like that? I mean, trust me, some of the people that I'm with take elitism to another fucking level. I probably haven't made much sense there. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed the show. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.